What's poppin', everybody?
Welcome back to the Cole Popcast.
I'm Zoe.
And I'm Steve.
And today we're going to talk about the Shroud of Turin, which is suspected or believed to be the cloth that Jesus Christ was actually buried in.
Yeah, so like whether or not you believe Jesus Christ was a historical figure or not, I do think this story is really interesting because, you know, the Shroud of Turin has been around for more than 1,000 years. People speculate that it was potentially an art piece, but others believe that it may have actually been the cloth that Jesus was buried in. Which sort of would add a little bit more historical relevance to the figure of Jesus Christ himself. And I just found this to be an interesting story. Of course, I'm a Christian, but, you know, that's not the only reason it's interesting. Generally speaking, like when we get into the videos for today, you're going to see how it's like, I didn't even know something like this could potentially even be possible. It's almost like the cloth that he was buried in took like a photograph of him and it like remained for thousands of years. And now they're studying it to see if it was actually him that was in there. But the evidence sort of shows that it could have been. So we're going to go ahead and see a video describing what the Shroud of Turin is. Then we're going to pause for a minute, talk about it, and then move on to the part where we learn sort of what the Shroud of Turin depicts. So, Lizzie, go ahead and hit the play button.
There's an ancient relic hidden away in a vault in Italy. Some say that it's the burial cloth of Jesus Christ himself, and others dismiss it as nothing more than a clever medieval forgery. And for centuries, this relic has sparked debates, divided scholars, and captured the imaginations of believers and skeptics alike. It's known as the Shroud of Turin, and it's one of the most mysterious artifacts in history.
All right.
Optical proofs of the resurrection that we have.
You can pause it. So basically, the Shroud of Turin is something that's like really controversial, technically, like from the secular scientific side to the Christian side. Even other Christians would be like, well, I don't believe in something like that because it's just a piece of cloth. And generally speaking, you don't really need a physical piece of evidence if you're going to be a Christian, I think. So it's like the idea of a cloth that Jesus was buried in.
You know, that sounds right. I'm sorry.
No, how does it sound? How does it sound?
No, I'm just like, you're like, and, you know, you don't need any evidence if you're a Christian.
Well, a physical piece of evidence. There's a difference.
Okay.
If you need a piece of cloth to tell you that Jesus was real, then that's kind of like, well, you may as well not believe in Jesus in the first place at that point.
I know. I'm coming from like the devil's advocate stance, where it's like, let's say I'm a scientist. And I'm like, you basically just tell me I don't need evidence. I don't need physical evidence to believe. It just comes off as like ironic.
Well, God is a spirit, right?
Yeah.
We don't need a piece of cloth to tell us that he existed or not, right? So generally, like, you don't really need this, but I think the idea and the concept of it is kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know? So,
No, it's cool. It's like, how do you know how they find out? Are they like carbon dating it?
Yeah, so they carbon dated it, and that's why I'm bringing this up, because it's like a recent controversy is that they had carbon dated it like a while ago. And they discovered like, oh, well, this was made around 1,300 years ago. But it turns out, so basically if it was 1,300 years ago, you know, Jesus died 2,000 years ago. So it wouldn't make sense for the cloth to be that new, basically. But basically they discovered that the pieces that were carbon dated were like little portions of it. They were like fragments from repairs. So like they were made, that the parts they tested were like cotton. And they weren't even using cotton back then or something like that. It was something of that nature where it's like, oh, they tested a part of it that wasn't the original piece, right? The original piece didn't get tested, but pieces of it did.
Oh, okay.
So
is the cloth that they're looking at, is a recreation that they made like back then of it?
No, it's more so like repairs, because like fires and shit, you know, like 1,000 years ago, stuff was just catching on fire randomly.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
like
true.
it was like held in a church somewhere that got caught on fire, so they tried to repair
like
it.
nonstop gender reveal.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a big balloon full of gasoline. That popped. It was a blue balloon full of gasoline, and it happened to be a boy child, so it burned down the whole church. It was a tragedy.
It happens, man. It happens.
Yeah, thousands of prehistoric Christians died.
Israelis, yeah.
Israelis. Okay, so let's see this next part. It kind of goes into detail about how the Shroud of Turin sort of depicts the history itself.
All right.
Have today, proving the truth of Christianity. What you're looking at is an X-rayed image of the shroud that shows a man with his arms crossed. The right of the picture shows his back, and the left of the picture shows his front. But if you zoom in, you find a few fascinating details, like a blood wound on his left wrist, which appears light because the photo was taken as a negative. And you can even see blood flowing up the arms. What's also interesting is that you can see that this man was tortured. These marks tell a story of immense suffering. Here you have pictures of what the Romans would use to torture their victims. And if you've seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, then you've seen what these whipping tools have looked like and how they were designed to tear chunks off of the flesh with each strike. The brutality is almost unimaginable. And these blood marks on the shroud aren't just marks, they're lash marks covering this man's body from head to toe, sparing only his face, forearms, and feet. Scholars estimate that there's between 1 and 200 whipping marks on his body. Okay, now I want you to take a look at this. On the right side of his back, as the historian Gary Haber...
I guess Mel Gibson had it right.
He was right, man. They definitely shouldn't have done that.
Beat the crap out of him.
Did you see the name of the whips though that they showed for a second there? It was like one of them was like spell drinking lash or something.
Really?
It looked like he put like video game weapons in the slide.
This is freaking them Eldritch horror level.
He's got
weapons.
like Elden Ring weapons on the. Like they beat Jesus with a leeching lash. With the life steal lash or something.
The damning whip of damnation.
But yeah, so what do you think about that, Zoe? Are you buying any of this, man? Do you think that maybe at the very least, like I think like if they were to try to recreate something like this, they would have had to kill a guy. They would have had to murder someone, torture him, and then wrap him in this cloth.
Yeah, I mean I can, because I've heard of I've seen like documentaries and stuff back in the day that covered like they know the tomb he was buried in. Mm-hmm. I've never like looked into it to like know that the shroud itself had a name, but I could believe it. Like I do believe absolutely that like Jesus most likely existed and that like they have the records and stuff like that, because I grew up Christian, so I was like told and seen like the actual like findings where they're like, oh, we can at least show that he was like a real person.
Right.
So I could absolutely believe like this is that happened. It seems like even the evidence that they're getting from the actual imagery on the cloth like matches up with the records of like how he was tortured.
Yeah, I mean, I just find that interesting in general. Like, I didn't know that was possible, that you could like have a piece of cloth that sort of shows the body that was in it. But I guess blood and remains and stuff like that. I guess it would leave an imprint or
I imagine it's
some sweat, something.
Yeah, I imagine it works somewhat like UV lights, because you go to a room with a UV light and you see all the semen on the wall. Like,
yeah, we actually have one in here, man. You guys don't want to turn that thing off.
Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I just wanted to talk about the Shroud of Turin a little bit. It's like there's a new development, I think. He talks about it a little bit, but I didn't pull the timestamp. But basically, like, I already explained it. They did the carbon testing, but now they're basically, it's like a mystery right now because they haven't done the next set of carbon dating on the older parts of the cloth. Just click a random spot, Leezy. Let's see if we can randomly find it.
Scientific method applied.
One of the key studies.
Yeah, let's do this one. This part's fine. Yeah.
Let me see.
It was conducted by a chemist named Ray Rogers. Now, Ray discovered that the part of the cloth that was tested in 1988 actually had different chemical properties than the rest of the shroud. So he investigated further, and he concluded that the area that was used in the carbon dating in 1988 actually contained cotton fibers and dye that weren't present in the rest of the cloth. So this indicates that the part of the cloth that was dated back in the 14th century wasn't actually a part of the original cloth and likely came from a later repair. So to help to make sense of all of this, once again, take a look at this picture. If you look at the marks on the side that kind of resemble paper doll cutouts, those are believed to be burn marks from accidental fires, specifically from the 1532 fire that damaged the shroud. So when we consider Rogers' study, which suggests a patch covering up the damage of the fire and other incidents, this could actually help explain why the dated samples didn't reflect the original age of the shroud and reflected a 13th or 14th century date. Another study that was led by a man named...
So that's like the mystery. I mean, I don't know. Anyone else have some thoughts on this? I mean, I just want to do a quick little episode about it.
Yeah. Do you think they'll be able to tell what race he was from this?
It turns out he was a melanated king.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
Based on this chart, turns out it was there's a lot of melanin left on the cloth.
A
couple curly hairs caught in the threads. Caught between the threads.
There's got to be a few hair samples left.
DNA.
There's got to be.
There's like a giant dick imprint like at the bottom of it. Yeah, there's like you can tell like in his pocket there isn't a wallet or something. It's like his pockets are empty. Like, damn, Jesus, you got your wallet again.
There was a smoke alarm that ran out of batteries in the room. It's still beeping to this day.
Yeah, it's beeping in the tomb. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this episode of the Cold Podcast. I mean, hopefully you guys are interested in this mystery. If not, that's too bad. You can check us out on all social media platforms at The Cold Podcast. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Check us out sometime. It's a really fun show. We'll be doing some more fun episodes after this in this recording session, so make sure you check them out. Thanks for popping in. We got to pop out.
All right. Peace.
Thank you, Jesus.